Weapons, warnings, and wild alliances. From Patriot missiles to North Korean shells, the world is responding to Russia's war against Ukraine like never before. Trump sends aid, Europe raises defense budgets, Putin deepens ties with dictators, and now even turns his back on some. Well, we've got a lot to unpack, so stay with us. This is The Gaze. Don't forget to follow our website, YouTube, and socials for more sharp takes and frontline reporting. The United States will supply Ukraine with long-awaited Patriot missile systems and other military equipment, President Donald Trump confirmed to reporters. He didn't specify the exact numbers of systems to be delivered, though noted that the European Union will reimburse the US the costs.
I haven't agreed on the number yet, but they're going to have some because they do need protection. But the European Union is paying for it. We're not paying anything for it, but we will send it. It'll be business for us, and we will send them Patriots, which they desperately need, because Putin is really surprised a lot of people. He talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. So there's a little bit of a problem there, and I don't like it.
14th of July looks like an important day for Ukrainian-American defense cooperation. Keith Kellogg, Trump's special envoy, arrived in Kyiv for talks with Ukraine's top leadership and will stay in the capital for 7 days.
We had very good conversation with General just now, and thank you, General, for coming. And thanks, we have often meetings with you and your team. Thanks to your team also for coming to Kyiv. Thank you so much. We are thankful to President Trump for his all messages and very strong decisions about resuming deliveries for us, and we are thankful for bipartisan support.
And as for Mr. Trump and his massive announcement of a new defensive and possibly offensive aid package to Ukraine, let's hear it firsthand.
And we make the best equipment, the best missiles, the best of everything. The European nations know that. And we've made a deal today, and I'm going to have Mark speak about it, but we've made a deal today where we are going to be sending them weapons and they're going to be paying for them. The United States will not be having any payment made. We're not buying it, but we will manufacture it and they're going to be paying for it. And one of the reasons that you're here today is to hear that we are very unhappy, I am, with Russia. But we'll discuss that maybe a different day. But we're very, very unhappy with them, and we're going to be doing very severe tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. Tariffs at about 100%. You'd call them secondary tariffs. You know what that means.
It's reassuring to hear that the EU will reimburse US weapon costs. But one question still hangs heavy. Who will repay Ukrainians for their sacrifice? While Russia poured resources into drones and missiles, the West unfortunately often invested in statements. But now perhaps that imbalance is starting to shift. A record-breaking US military aid package is expected to pass the Senate in the coming days. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the goal is clear: give Ukraine the tools it needs to defend itself. According to Graham, Putin seriously miscalculated by trying to play games with the president of the US. Now, says Graham, Trump has begun taking concrete action against the aggressor and all those who back him.
Putin has calculated that we would get tired and Europe would get weary. He made a huge mistake. NATO is bigger and stronger, and we're more committed than ever to make sure he does not take Ukraine by force. So Congress is on the verge of passing the most consequential sanction package in the history of the country. It will give President Trump tools he doesn't have today, a literal sledgehammer. And the big offender here is China, India, and Brazil. India buys oil from Russia cheap and resells it. That's despicable. I've talked to President Trump. He said last week it's time to move. He's tried to entice Putin to the table, but my goal is to end this war, and the only way you're going to end this war is to get people who prop up Putin, make them choose between the American economy and helping Putin.
Ukraine will receive its first long-range missiles funded by Germany. This was announced by Major General Christian Froding, head of the Special Ukraine Task Force in the German Bundestag. According to him, the military situation in Ukraine is tense and has been getting worse in recent weeks. And therefore, Germany should deliver the first long-range missiles to the Ukrainian armed forces in mid-July. President Volodymyr Zelensky and Chancellor Friedrich Merz signed the corresponding document on the 28th of May.
The situation in Ukraine is certainly militarily tense right now, and the Russian military has been in the lead for weeks, if not months. We need weapon systems that can penetrate deep into Russian territory and strike at warehouses, command posts, airfields and airplanes. Christian Freuding, head of the Special Staff for Ukraine in the Bundestag, Major General, in a commentary for ZDF.
North Korea is currently providing up to 40% of the ammunition Russia uses in the war against Ukraine, as ties between Pyongyang and Moscow continue to grow deeper. This was stated by Kirill Budanov, head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, in an interview with Bloomberg. According to Budanov, Kim Jong-un is also supplying Russia with ballistic missiles and artillery systems. In return, Russia is giving North Korea money and technology, helping the regime break out of its international isolation.
North Korea is now supplying Russia with up to 40% of the ammunition for the war against Ukraine, as the partnership between Pyongyang and Moscow strengthens. These are good weapons. North Korea has a huge stockpile, and production is going on around the clock. Kirill Budanov, head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, in an interview with Bloomberg News Agency.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius will meet with Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth in Washington today. They will also discuss further support for Ukraine in resisting Russian aggression, the German Defense Ministry announced. This is Pistorius' first visit to Washington since Donald Trump's re-election. Alongside Pistorius, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is arriving in the US Capitol today. He is scheduled to meet with the US President, Secretary of State, and Defense Minister. Notably, on this very day, July 14th, Trump has promised to make an important announcement regarding Russia's war against Ukraine. And while we are all waiting, France intends to increase its defense budget to 64 billion euros by 2027, twice the amount it was in 2017 when Emmanuel Macron took the office. Macron announced these plans yesterday during a speech to the French military.
The budget of the armed forces in 2017 was 32 billion euros. The current law on military planning will add another 3.5 billion euros in 2026 and another 3 billion euros next year. Thus, in 2027, we will allocate 64 billion euros to defense. This will be double the budget for the armed forces than in 2017.
It finally looks like European leaders are aligning with common sense when it comes to defense. France and Germany are now doubling their investments in the military capabilities, while Poland and the Baltic states are preparing directly for the threat of Russian aggression. The EU is even considering purchasing US weapons to supply Ukraine. So perhaps cautiously but optimistically, we can say it. Europe is finally seeing Russia for what it really is, a threat, one it's better to be ready for than caught off guard. And building on that, the European Union is close to wrapping up its 18th sanctions package against Russia. This time, thanks to Estonia's firm stance, it includes a cap of Russian oil prices. Reuters reports that all of the key elements are already in place, and EU envoys are hoping to seal the deal today. Even Slovakia, which had held up the talks, has now come around. Since the 10th of July, the Central Bank of Russia has expanded the list of foreign currencies for which it sets official exchange rates against the ruble. The list now includes 12 more currencies: Bangladeshi taka, Bahraini dinar, Bolivian boliviano, Cuban peso, Algerian dinar, Ethiopian birr, Iranian rial, Myanmar kyat, Mongolian tugrik, Nigerian naira, Omani rial, and Saudi rial. Wow, now Russian ruble is unstoppable, on its way down. Russia's military-industrial complex has reached its maximum capacity for producing armored vehicles. This was revealed by a senior NATO official, speaking anonymously to European Pravda media. Peak production level is expected to hold for about another year, but no further growth is even possible. The sector is already running at full throttle. According to NATO, Russia produces up to 130 tanks per month, roughly 1,600 per year. However, most are upgraded older models. Around 2,000 outdated tanks remain in shortage, many only suitable as spare parts source. Since the start of the full-scale war, Russia has lost at least 2,700 tanks and counting. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has stated that the Kremlin may allocate up to $300 billion for its war effort in 2026. According to Zelensky, Russia still has enough resources to continue funding the war, but he believes new sanctions could significantly worsen the aggressor's country budget's deficit.
We believe that Putin can spend $300 billion next year on the war. The sanctions will stop his ability to finance it, so there will be a deficit of such large budgets. And of course, we need to talk about increasing funding for our soldiers. Yes, these are unexpected signals for sure, but I was very frank today at the Coalition of the Willing. We need to have a strong army, of course, and go the full contract-based army composition. This is the right thing to do. This is the moment until we have the end of the war, the first stage, the ceasefire, but strong sanctions will influence the Russians' willingness to talk.
Vladimir Putin has expanded the list of information covered by Russia's state secret. The new rules now allow authorities to classify any data related to foreign policy, international trade, the economy, scientific research, and tossed in carefully preparations for potential mobilization. Attempting to access such classified information can now lead up to 8 years in prison. According to Bloomberg, this move is part of the Kremlin's broader effort to tighten control over Russian society as the war against Ukraine continues. And the result of Russia's harsh switching to military economy completely is higher prices for utilities for ordinary residents in the occupied territories of Ukraine. Russia has raised utility tariffs in the temporarily occupied parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. The occupation administrations call it gradual indexation, like a leveling to all Russian standards. However, in fact, this means that Russia has abandoned yet another of its propaganda promises made during its hybrid aggression in 2014, cheap utility, which back then allowed Russians to secure some level of support and reduce protest potential after the occupation. At the occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, the costs of utilities in particular were indeed cheaper than in Ukraine in general. However, now it tends to become even higher than in that part of Ukraine that is free and not occupied. The reason is obvious. Donetsk, a city of 1 million people, has been living with water supply by the day and hour for 3 years now, because it was the Russian army destroyed the Seversky-Donetsk river channel back in 2022. Putin has betrayed Iran and pleads them to move towards a progress in negotiations with the United States. That's according to a report by Axios, citing European and Israeli officials. Russia has supported Iran's nuclear program for years, so is this policy shift a sign that Putin is trying to repair his strained relationship with Trump? Find out in our report.
The Russian dictator is once again trying to position himself as a mediator in negotiations between Iran and the United States. According to Axios, citing its sources, Putin is now urging Tehran to accept Washington's demand to halt uranium enrichment.
Putin would support zero enrichment. He encouraged the Iranians to work towards that in order to make negotiations with the Americans more favorable. The Iranians said they won't consider it. From Axios reporting.
For a long time, Moscow had been Tehran's main diplomatic ally. But now, while Russia publicly defends Iran's right to develop its nuclear program, Putin has made yet another policy shift, this time to signal loyalty to the White House. Experts say this is typical behavior for him. When Iran was useful to the Kremlin as a source of drones and military technology, Moscow promoted the idea of a strategic partnership. But now, after the 12-day war with Israel and American airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, Putin seems to be trying to regain favor with the U.S. president. Donald Trump recently launched a scathing attack on the Russian dictator for refusing to end the war in Ukraine and said he is seriously considering new sanctions on Russia.
We're not happy with Putin. I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, because he's killing a lot of people. We get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin, for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
Despite its formal strategic partnership with Iran, experts believe Russia won't come to its longtime allies' aid. now or in the future. The war in Ukraine is draining Moscow's resources and attention.
Iran and Russia operate under the logic that their security isn't mutually dependent, though they do cooperate in certain specific areas. But in the event the Ayatollah regime in Iran is at risk of collapsing, the help they could expect from Russia wouldn't be much more than what Assad got. It's unlikely the Russian Federation would seriously go out of its way to save a drowning ally.
Putin has no permanent friends or enemies, only interests. When Russia controlled Assad's regime in Syria, its military bases and supply routes operated there. But when that regime began to collapse, Russia simply stepped aside. After Assad fled to Russia in December 2024, Kremlin propaganda was quietly instructed to erase all mention of the former Syrian dictator. The Kremlin also failed in its attempt to stop Turkey from mediating peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia. On July 10th, Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan held direct talks in Abu Dhabi. Russia wasn't even considered as a mediator. Its relationships with both Yerevan and Baku have deteriorated significantly.
Russia now depends on countries like Azerbaijan to bypass Western sanctions. That means Moscow is reliant on partners like Baku, giving those countries stronger bargaining power. Russia has long wanted a role in the Zangezur corridor project. It even proposed deploying its border guards there, which would have given it significant leverage. But both Armenia and Azerbaijan appear to have agreed. They don't want Russia involved. Sylvia Stober, South Caucasus expert, in an interview with Deutsche Welle.
As a result, Russia is losing its influence in the Middle East and apparently in the South Caucasus as well. Finland's president recently called Putin a strategic and military failure. Alexander Stubb believes Putin made a fatal mistake by launching a full-scale war against Ukraine. His goal was to break NATO and spread chaos in the European Union, but he achieved the opposite. The EU is more united than ever. NATO has new members, and the alliance is increasing defense spending and military capabilities. Meanwhile, Russia is now seen as the biggest threat to European security. Reported by Natalia Husek, Volodymyr Stengelov, UATV News.
Putin's war machine is fueled by lies, terror, and toxic diplomacy. But the world is finally catching up with weapons, unity, and sanctions that bite. While the Kremlin is getting more and more isolated and more desperate by the day. Drop your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for more right here on The Gaze.